أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Welcome to session 4 of this series of Passionate Pages, where we're going through the wondrous book, the Mahdi, Understanding the Awaited One by Sayyid Munir al-Khabbas. You can see here on the back of the book. If you are tuning in for the very first time, you're very welcome to the show. You have missed out on a little bit, 4 sessions or 3 sessions on this book, and previously to this we went through the tafsir of Ziyarat Ashura by Sheikh Al-Fan in the book entitled The Sacred Effusion, and prior to that we went through the book How to Pray a Good Prayer by Sheikh Ali Raza Panahian. So if either of those books sound like something that you'd like to go into, you can check them out on the Ahlulbayt TV YouTube page, and the content is over there. But for now, we dive in and back in, actually, Muhammad Jawad, and salam alaikum to you.
Alaikum salam, how are you?
We, alhamdulillah, all good, thank you. We dive back into something that I think we rushed, or I rushed a little bit last week, that you told me to maybe think about again. So last week we were talking about proving the reality, proving that the Imam's return is necessary, it's a definite, etc. And we said that we're putting our detective's hat on to look at all the evidence on the table and make an informed decision. And there was last few points that we rushed, which we'll just show on the slides just now. And these were the last 3 points. So the first was textual evidence. So what we had gone through already was that there has to be an imam for every era. That was our first kind of point of proof. The second was the proof of that there being a concept of the 12 leaders being mentioned over and over again. We looked at the Old and the New Testament testifying to this leadership that would come. And then we looked at history, started going to history, and that in the 3rd century you had the ambassadors of the Imams that no one denied, the letters that they were receiving at the time. History really supported it at that point in time during the 3rd century. And where we got to on the next point was textual evidence. And this was, we mentioned these, but we rushed them. So we have numerous Sahih traditions that point towards the Imam's birth. And we said that was in the likes of Al-Kafi and Manla, 2 of our main hadith books within the Shia school of thought. And this is one of the hadith that is mentioned, and this is reported and attributed to Imam Al-Kadhim alayhi salam. Say in sajda al-shukr, in sajda al-shukr, O God, I witness to you and ask your angels, prophets, messengers, and all creation to witness that you, O God, are my Lord, that Islam is my religion, that Muhammad is my prophet, and that Ali, Al-Hassan, Al-Hussein, Ali ibn Al-Hussein, Muhammad ibn Ali, Ja'far ibn Muhammad, Musa ibn Ja'far, Ali ibn Musa, Muhammad ibn Ali, Ali ibn Muhammad, Al-Hassan ibn Ali, and the Hujjah, the son of Al-Hassan ibn Ali, are my leaders, and I vow allegiance to them and forswear their enemies. So what we see here is that the Imam, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraj Sharif, is mentioned even before his birth in our ahadith as well. So again, this is another thing to add to our evidence on the table to see, is this guy legit? Where's he come from? So on and so forth. So that was the textual evidence. There was 2 more points, and then we'll just finish off this part. The genealogist's concurrence. So in any kind of complex situation, again, detective hat, you'd go to the experts, right? If there's fingerprints, you'd go to forensic experts.
I think so.
Is that what it is, right?
Maybe.
If you're investigating the collapse of a bridge, we'll come to you.
You go to,
Yours truly.
Or tunnels, but not bridges.
Tunnels. Oh, man, I knew it. It's something engineering, So you go to an expert in that field, right? And genealogist would be one of the experts that you would seek the opinion of in this situation. So people who analyze, for example, origins of family lines and kind of where do people come from. So they say, looking at the family of the Hashemites, there are at least 17 non-12 genealogists that testify to the birth of a child named Muhammad to Imam al-Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam. And we said last week, our way to say his name, we call him typically the Mahdi or Al-Mahdi, Al-Qa'im, but his name is Muhammad Al-Mahdi. And hence that hadith, awwaluna, awsatuna, wa akhiruna, Muhammad. And Sayyid Munir actually includes all of the references from those genealogists as well in the book, which is quite cool.
Very thorough.
Really thorough, actually, yeah. Which we, again, something that Sayyid Munir is known for is the way he constructs his arguments with evidence, etc. It's amazing. And the very last point is a unanimous agreement amongst historians that regardless of which denomination of Islam you look in, or the majority of Muslim denominations, they've recorded his birth, they've recorded his occultation, And again, there's a whole list of names and references in there, but you don't see this dispute about the concept of him existing. It's there.
Yeah.
Whether he is the awaited saviour is probably where the debate comes in, but him being a gentleman named Muhammad, born to Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, is evidenced in history. So when we then look and just take a step back, and you can see this on screen from A to G, an imam for every era, the 12 imams, the Old and the New Testaments, 3rd century, textual evidence, genealogist concurrence, and historians' agreement. When you add up all those probabilities, as you said last time, it gets to a point of statistical significance.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, you'd probably say he existed.
Yeah. All of this can't all be wrong.
Yeah, it's too,
There are too many variables that sort of
together.
align for it to then be discounted as something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To any rational, objective mind. Obviously,
Yeah.
if you've got a secret agenda, then you'll find gaps somehow.
Yeah, and that's between you and
everything.
your Lord.
That's between you and your Lord, exactly. I don't want to get in between of that. So just to finish off this chapter then, and then inshallah we'll go on to today's session, Who is Waiting. We kind of just say for a second, okay, if let's put aside the evidence and the textual support just for the time being, and let's look at the philosophical dimension of this awaited saviour and the concept behind it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses or answers, I guess, for us what the meaning of life is. We're going to go on a very philosophical trend now. Surah 67, verse number 2. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتِ وَالْحَيَاةِ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْغَفُورُ. So from Surah Al-Mulk. Surah Al-Mulk. He who created death and life, that he may test you to see which of you is best in conduct, and he is the Almighty, the All-Forgiving. So this last part that you can see in the last part, أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, so he may test you to see which of you is best in conduct. We can see that man is created in order to go and achieve excellence, to go and almost be, not like a race, but almost to like go and see how far you can get, right? Here's a test, let's see how well you do kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we can see that the conclusion of this, best in conduct, is when there is a winner. And the winner is the triumph of justice and virtue over oppression and vice. That's what the Imam alayhi salam come to establish. So if this is a goal, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this, that look, we're trying to see if this is going to happen, it must happen one day. Allah's not just going to make it up, tease us, and then run off, right? It's going to happen one day. Otherwise, the creation is meaningless, and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't create without purpose. So we know Allah mentions that He's assessing based on this. Therefore, there must be a day when it's achieved, or you believe that He's just mentioned it for, just for fun, which is not in Allah's nature, if you like. So, as a result, and in a way as to how we can get there, we are told in Surah number 57, verse 25, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابِ وَالْمِيزَانَ لَيَقُومُ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. That certainly we sent our apostles with manifest proofs, and we sent down with them the book and the balance that mankind may maintain justice. So we've given, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His lutf has given us these divine guides, these scriptures, these immaculate leaders, so that they can help us achieve this goal. He's not just left us bare and without that. And one day we'll achieve it and we'll fulfill God's promise that certainly we wrote in the Psalms after the Torah, indeed our righteous servant shall inherit the earth. One day this inheriting will happen, right? So as you see, we're moving away from all of those previous evidences, not to negate them or anything, but just to look at this in a different lens. We can see that from Quranic proof that the promised day of justice will dawn upon the earth one day. It will come. Allah refers to it, and then He sends down proofs or guides to help us and scriptures to help us. And He says at some point, these righteous servants will inherit the earth. So we can see when you put that all together, it's coming for sure. The second side that we can then also look at this promised day of salvation is the social dimension. And this one I found really interesting actually. It's a very simple argument that maybe the one that we've just mentioned before relies on someone to believe in the Quran. Whereas this is something that you can speak to anyone about in the world. And that is, history has and it's a social dimension, right? So history has a very recurring trend. And that is that it's not that it progresses randomly, it's that there's like the survival of the fittest when it comes to civilizations. So let's make this very simple. If in the UK, we're based here, let's say for example the current government, the Tory government, imagine, we're doing well. right? The economy was prospering, people felt cared for, helped, supported, so on and so on and so on. And we're not making this political, but I think it's fair to say it's not quite the case, right? But if it was, people wouldn't be so keen to get them out of power. They'd be like, yeah, stay. Whether they've done good or not thus far, again, different matter. But what we know for sure is that right now they're struggling, right? They're not doing very well. So history dictates, social pressures arise, and they say, look, you're failing. There's long queues in the NHS and the health service. We're struggling with inflation now, so on and so on. You need to get out. There needs to be another person that comes in or another party that comes in to bring about this better situation.
Yeah.
And that's the similar trend that we saw for the prophets and reformers generally. There is a bad context. People uprise or people get frustrated. This new person comes in, everything's nice until they fail. And then someone else comes in until they fail. And it's just a repeated cycle, right? It constantly happens. So once all of the nations in the world and the people in the world realize that no matter who you put in at the moment, when they're using kind of existing civic structures, they're just not going to suffice. They're not good enough. They're just not, they don't provide the necessary economic and personal security that's required, right? It's just not working. And once mankind realizes that the current situation and setup that we have and the current leaders that we have are not good enough, that will kick off the global revolution for people to say, we need a perfect leader. We haven't got space for me and you to turn up and try, for Boris to try, for Donald Trump to try, for Biden to try, for Obama to try. We ain't got time for these guys anymore, right? We need someone who's immaculate, who knows everything. So the nature of society at this point revolts against fear and anger. And it's very much what Imam Hussein alayhi salam did. He led to to create a revolution to enjoin good and forbid evil against oppressors who used fear-mongering to try and gain power. And we see this with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the way he talks about why he's coming to establish justice. So anyway, that was like a very quick, and sorry, I know I just went on for a very long time.
No.
Any thoughts just on those concluding bits?
I think based on the fact that history, as you mentioned, is repetitive and human condition is cyclical, there's all these systems that have been tried out, from communism to what's now capitalism, which is failing as well. And there's been numerous systems in between. I'm not an expert in economics, like not even a beginner in economics, but I know that there have been various systems that have not worked in the past that are now being rubbished and demonized. And there will come a point where the system that we're currently in, and it's glaringly obvious, it's not working. You've got incredibly large gaps between the rich and the poor, and everyone falling in the middle of that, homelessness rising, resources reducing in their supply, which is then causing wars to occur and stuff. So it's not working, like not just in our government, but just globally. So it's quite interesting to see what system the Imam alayhi salam will implement.
It's exciting,
but it is needed,
right?
It's
needed, it's exciting, and you need someone who's perfect to do it, right?
But I don't see many other systems before that one coming into place anytime soon. Like I can't envisage any sort of new system that is an offshoot of capitalism, if you know what I mean. So maybe it's
because even if you go, towards the far left, there are also then challenges there, because then they say, oh, you're not creating enough capital in the economy to make sure that it can actually sustain itself, and so on and so on. And then so it almost feels like with this left and right wing thing, it needs a different dimension with different concepts and thinking. And
exactly, and it feels like all the options at the moment have just been exhausted. Like all the approaches have been, unless you have someone else who isn't the Imam, who then tries implementing a new system, which will then have to wait for it to fail before the Imam.
And they'll need to have very good arguments to get there. So that is the conclusion of that, which makes us realize, inshallah, that we see that this isn't necessary reality. This is something that is coming. And the question that now comes to, which is today's session title, is who is waiting? What is this wait about? Why do we need to wait? And once we understand why we need to wait, what are we doing when it comes to waiting? So inshallah, we'll get straight into this. Look at that for a nice little slide. That's very nice. Thank you our friends at Google for this template. I'm not going to take any credit. So we start with the following verse, Surah number 10, verse number 20. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَيَقُولُونَ لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْهِ آيَةٌ مِّن رَبِّهِ فَقُلْ إِنَّمَا الْغَيْبُ لِلَّهِ فَانْتَظِرُوا إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُنْتَظِرِينَ. And I think we mentioned this ayah in the last session as well. They say, why has not some sign been sent down to him from his Lord? Say, the knowledge of the unseen belongs only to God, so wait, I too am waiting along with you. So the context of the verse is really important, and that is that the disbelievers were asking the Prophet, they're like, look, give me a little bit more, right? You've brought down the Quran, but that's not enough. We need a bit more. Convince us that you're actually something. Convince us that you got something special. And at which point, the Holy Prophet is guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we see that in the Quran, to tell them that the knowledge of the unseen belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah. There is another miracle, but it's in the realm of the unseen, in the ghaiba, which we've discussed. So wait, I too am waiting along with you. So you need to wait until this miracle becomes apparent to you. You've got the Quran right now, but there will be the second thing that comes about that is going to be as impactful as the Quran, but you need to wait. It's currently in hiding, but you need to wait.
So this has been said during the time of the Prophet. So obviously at that point, you've got members of the Ahlulbayt who come before the Mahdi. So I guess this is addressing people in the future rather than the present, people that were asking for a miracle.
I think even at that time, those disbelievers were saying, give us a bit more. And he's like, you need to have this concept of waiting. Like the ghaiba is something that you need to believe in. It's not just going to come to you right now. This is for generations to come as well.
I see.
In the same way that we're tested with the ghaiba, like what is in the unseen. So the question is, what is this second miracle that provides this similar unequivocal support like the Quran, right? And the giveaway, it's the Imam, but let's be a bit more clear. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam references this verse in a hadith, saying that the miracle is the unseen is the hujjah. And for Islam to emerge as the sole religion on earth, that would be miraculous. So if you imagine the impact of the Quran, that was miraculous. But imagine now, suddenly, Islam becomes the religion of the earth. That everyone goes, wow, like that is the truth. That would be a miraculous moment. Just as the Quran was very miraculous in its nature, this would also be very miraculous. And obviously that requires the Imam to come and establish it as such. So with this, we then see another ayah of Quran 14:5. Certainly we sent Musa with our signs. Bring your people out from darkness into light and remind them of God's holy days. So what on earth are these holy days, right? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam discusses this and he says God's holy days are three. It's reported to say God's holy days are three. The day of the emergence of the awaited from the ghaiba, which is obviously what we're discussing, the day of death and the day of judgment. Now, critically, what's important for us to understand here from a principles perspective is that each of these days has a set and definite time.
Right.
Now, we're going to come on to the point that this can change, but there is a set and definite time for it. There's another discussion about the meaning of this narration, which you can look at on page 79, but on like narrations about specific dates as to when he'll emerge, but we won't go into that for now, but viewers can have a look. So, the question there is, do circumstances and historical events play any part in determining when this day is? Is it just that, it's set, let's say 13th of March, I'm using Gregorian calendar for whatever reason, let's say 13th Shawwal in 1521, right? So that's probably 100 years from now, right? Does any historical events, past or present, past historical events or to-be events play any part in changing this, or is it completely independent of it? The first view is that it's like the Day of Judgment and it has a set time and it will not occur a moment sooner or later. And that's what we've seen in that previous evidence that we just mentioned. The second view is that circumstances do play a role in determining when. And what we need to realize here is that whilst narrations do indicate that he's going to emerge on a specific day, they also describe a number of circumstances that will precede his emergence. And the date of the emergence may be delayed or brought forward by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's in Allah's power that he's able to do this, right? But also it's based on the actions and decisions of mankind and what we're doing day to day. So the same way in the way we see death, right? Your day is written. Allah knows what that day is. You, for example, could have the potential to live 100 years. But Allah knows unfortunately, that when you're 18, you're going to commit suicide. You had the potential to go to 100. Allah doesn't interfere with what you're going to do, and that's the whole discussion of determinism and free will and whatever. So you have the potential, if you pick life choices A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you actually will hit 100. But unfortunately, because you picked life choices X, Y, Z, you're going to only live to 18.
There's this one hadith that was narrated to say that, I think it was to do with Sila Rahim, in that if you don't maintain your family relations, your life reduces by up to 30 years.
Yeah, lifespan can reduce.
And if you do maintain it, it then increases by up to 30 years.
Crazy, isn't it?
And I think it was in this chapter. Just trying to.
I'm going to go on the hunt for it.
Actually, yeah, keep going, and then I'll look for it.
It's nice to have those kind of examples because it makes us realise it can change. But the important point for the viewers to understand is that it's not that Allah knows what's going to happen. Allah knows the end date. And the example I like to give, for example, with us as new parents, we know that if our kids try to stand and they're just beginning to stand, we know they're going to fall at some point. Yeah. Right? But you don't interfere with that inevitability. You know it's going to happen, right? So similarly, Allah will know.
Exactly. So I just found it by Imam Qadim alayhi salam. He's reported to have said, an individual may honor his family while his death is 3 years away, and God will make it 30 years away. Wow. And an individual may sever his family ties while his death is 30 years away, and God will make it 3 years away. So yeah, like you said, your actions...
Quite powerful, isn't it? It's quite powerful.
Yeah, your actions will determine your fate. Kind of feels like, you know, one of those books, it used to be Goosebumps for me, where...
Oh, wow.
like they say, go to... Like they give you 3 choices. They say, go to page 35 if you want to go over the bridge. Okay. Or go to page 37 if you want to open the door.
Got it.
And then if you go over the bridge, you survive. And then if you go to page 37, like you open, like you just
go back now. Sorry.
He goes, oh, you open the door and a cannonball swings and smacks you in the face, and then that's it, you die, kind of thing.
You can use this example. I like it. Yeah. So we like these simple examples.
Choose your fate type thing.
That's it.
Is basically based on your actions.
And I think that's the thing we need to understand, right? It's like you almost imagine there's like a timeline, and there's a date that's set, and that date can move depending on mankind's actions. The difference is that Allah knows where this is eventually going to stop. Yeah. He knows that. So the same way that death is contingent on circumstances and choices, similarly, the emergence is contingent on circumstances and choices. And the choices are in our hands as humankind. Depending on what we do, this could advance or delay it as a result. The first evidence behind this second view, that circumstances do play a role in determining when, just like death, is a hadith from Imam Salih alayhi salam, which you can now see. Imam Salih alayhi salam is reported to say, surely Allah has appointed the time of this matter in the 70th year after Hijrah. When Hussein was killed, God's wrath intensified and he delayed it until the 140th year after Hijrah. We told you of this and you spread the word and lifted the veil of secrecy. Since then, God has not given us a date. And God effaces, which translates to erases, and confirms whatever he wishes, and with him is the mother book. So what we see here is that the time is contingent on a number of circumstances, and even things that happened before or logically preceded another, i.e. the death of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Because of such a significant tragedy, we see that the date of this emergence changes. And that's one evidence that we have. So having just looked at that first hadith from Imam Salih alayhi salam, we'll now look at a second evidence in proving or illustrating the point that circumstances do play a role in when this event will occur. So the date is written, Allah knows that, but the date is changing, but Allah knows the eventual date. So what's the second evidence? This one is actually quite interesting, and I think it's quite easy to stomach in a way. And that is that there are so many supplications that we recite, Allahumma ajjil li walika al-faraj, or Allah hasten the return of the faraj, right, for example. And we have the dua that we recite after ziyarah, at least in our center all the time. You have that dua in dua al-ahad, for example, in ilahi azm al-bala, for example. All these kind of different du'as where we supplicate and pray for the hastening of the reappearance. Why would we pray for the hastening of the reappearance if it was going to have no effect?
Yeah,
it's quite a simple logical construct, right? Yeah. So that's, there are therefore conditions that need to be met that will bring about the Imam. Therefore, we pray for these to be met, and therefore the Imam can come. This is a very interesting note, and I think we've mentioned this maybe twice or 3 times, just to hammer it home. Just because something is inevitable, it doesn't mean that its timing cannot be, by God's will, contingent on mankind's choices. God knows exactly when it will happen. I think we've explained that point.
Yeah, the knowledge is only with Him.
Absolutely.
So
the infinite knowledge.
He has every ability to then move it as He so wishes.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So the question that then comes up is, what are the circumstances that influence when the Imam will reappear? So again, we've alluded to a few of these. So we're going to look at some of the circumstances preceding the emergence, some ideological and some spiritual circumstances, because they're typically the most important in this kind of discussion. So the first, we mentioned this, humanity is going to try all these different political, economic systems. They're all going to fail, some more dramatically than others.
Yeah.
They're all going to leave mankind to suffer. At this point, then everyone's going to wake up and be like, okay, we really need this emergence to come about. We really need this new solution. And you could argue right now, as you said, the way that I think even friends at work would agree, like no one actually believes in many political systems anymore, because especially what we've experienced the last 10 years in the UK and in the US, it's just been garbage, right, frankly.
Yeah.
And this is what's beautiful from Imam Salih alayhi salam. His reward say, our state is the final state. There will be no household that will lead a state except that it shall accede to it before us, that none can say, once they see our model, if we were to rule, we would rule like them. So no one's going to be able to try and match the level by which the Ahlulbayt ﷺ would rule. And that is the word of God, and we hear this typically when the Masa'ib is finished. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayy munqalibin yanqalibun wal 'aqibatu lil muttaqin. I love it, like these random phrases that we've kind of like been brought up with, and we have no idea what they mean.
Yeah.
I don't. And that is the word of God, and the outcome will be in favor of the God-wary. Wal 'aqibatu lil muttaqin. So after all this Masa'ib that you hear, don't worry. Wal 'aqibatu lil muttaqin. The outcome will be in favor of the God-wary.
It's very powerful.
It's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of those you want on the wall. In the
Yes.
kitchen. It's like we get
That's
some,
a shout, actually.
we should do that.
Yeah.
Order me one. So that's the first point, right? So humanity is going to try everything, realize it's going to be awful. Imam Sadiq telling us the way we're going to rule, everyone's going to look and be like, wow, that's pretty impressive, and they wouldn't be able to rule. وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The second thing that needs to happen in order for this reappearance to happen is that the emergence requires a base that will defend the Imam. And I think this is one that we typically speak about, and everyone says this hasn't occurred yet, so what are you doing to be amongst that foundation and that base? Because behind any successful revolution, there's always the people that are at the forefront, right? You need those believers from the very beginning. And again, now we look to a hadith, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam reported to say, surely the people of the era of his, Imam Mahdi's, occultation, who believe in his immaculate leadership and who wait his appearance better than the people of any other era. That is because Allah gave them the intellect, comprehension and knowledge that allowed them to see occultation at the level of presence. And we've got to realize this is talking about us.
Yeah.
The fact that we are those who are, alhamdulillah, have this belief in the ghaiba, in the unseen, and we can't see it, but we believe in it.
At that level of presence is
that's the condition
that stuck out to me the most.
Yeah, exactly. He made them at that era at the status of those who struggled alongside Rasulullah with their swords. Those are the real devotees, our true Shia, and the callers unto God's religion in public and in privacy.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Like, we can only try our very best. But it's so amazing to hear, like, when you feel that level of despair, to know that the likes of Sajjad alayhi salam are like, hey, we've already thought about you guys. Here's your rank. If you're really doing this correctly, here's your rank. We're with you. And therefore, we know that there's a group of select individuals who are going to be of such a muttaqi nature. They're going to be muwahhids. They're going to be just like those companions that we mentioned earlier in earlier sessions. That will be the cornerstone of his state, that the Imam will look towards and depend upon to run certain institutions or whatever. And this is another very important condition.
Yeah.
So, with those conditions, now we've understood those, the next question that could come about when it comes to this waiting is, why is it that we need to wait till the end of time? Because theoretically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could just do it for fast forward and just, or rewind, we should say, and just be like, it's going to be here, and why do we need to wait for so long? And this I found really, really, really interesting. And you'll see each of these points leads to the next. So why didn't Allah create this state at the beginning of time and provide the means for the Prophet to establish this state 1400 years ago?
Yeah.
Right? Why don't you get it done and move on? The first thing that we need to understand, and this is going to be one point built on the other, so it needs a bit of focus. is the concept that there are earthly limits. So you and I and anyone else, we can't be in two places at the same time. We can't be in two time zones at the same time, right? We are limited by time and space as physical human beings. As a result of that, our ability to learn or progress is limited. I can't be in a history class at the same time as an applied class. I can only be in one and the other, right? If you now extrapolate that to humanity, that is true of everyone in humanity. They progress at a certain speed given time and space restrictions, right? Therefore, there are limitations. So there's a limitation by which generations can accumulate knowledge. So if you look at, for example, the progression of science since many, many, many years ago till today, that needed generations over time to accumulate, we can create electricity through these means. With electricity we can power a battery. With the power of a battery we can do this. We can actually now create a telescope. We can now create this latest thing that's gone to space. I don't know if you have this new telescope that's now gone for another like huge mission. It's been in progress for many years, billions of pounds. But anyway, it takes time. They couldn't have just dropped that from nowhere 1400 years ago, for example. So every generation takes time in accumulating its knowledge and developing its culture, which Sayyid calls cultural accumulation, or we translate it as cultural accumulation. And therefore, there is a time period by which we can progress. Human needs is the next part. We require generations of accumulated knowledge and developed insight in order to be ready to accept the latest thing that comes out. If we'd gone back many years ago and said, here's a Duracell AA battery, this is going to power your torch, they'd be like, what's a battery? What's a torch? I've got a candle, right? The science, they weren't ready for that at that point in time. Whereas today would be like, a battery, I'm on solar power. So we've gone ahead a little bit. So in the same way that if the message of the Holy Prophet was given at the time of Nabi Adam, humanity at that time wouldn't have been able to adopt those. They weren't ready for it. Because the same question could be asked, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wait until the last prophet, and more specifically until his time period, to provide the perfect teachings of the Quran? Why didn't it just start with Nabi Adam? Well, they weren't ready at that time. It took certain generational understanding and change, and at the time of the Prophet, Allah believed at that point, Allah decreed that this is the right moment. In the same way, we need to wait until a certain moment where the completion, the end, etc. is going to happen, and that's when the community is ready for it.
It's quite fascinating though, because you're talking over 2,000, 3,000 years, and so much has been said and researched about the technological advances back then. So you say during Nabi Sulaiman's time and everything that followed, like the structures that were being built and all of these things, and there were points where I think, was it the people of Ad and Thamud who are like really established in terms of their development as a civilization, and then got destroyed because of their arrogance. I might be wrong, but I think it was a series by Sheikh Jafar Ladak who was talking about this. But essentially, they were at such a high level of advancement in civilization back then, say the Romans, the Greeks and all that, and yet that was thousands of years ago, and yet we're still not at a point like, I don't know, is it to do with our learning, our spirituality, etc.?
Probably a combination,
Exactly. We're still not at that point where we're then ready for the Imam to reappear. And it's taken like thousands and thousands of years. Whereas technological advancements, say, from that Nokia 3210 to what we have now, and like you said, like from the moon landings and all the telescopes and then launching, like that's happened in the last 20, 30 years.
Very aggressively,
And yet, that sort of 30-year window compared to the thousands of years, that's how technology can advance at such a pace. And we're still not at a point.
It's crazy. When you think about it, it's crazy. And I think in the next session we'll talk about the cosmic civilization, which I think I said at the very beginning was like my favorite chapter of one of my favorite chapters in this book.
I haven't read that yet. I need to.
Oh, you get ready for that one.
I'm doing it by week, and it's actually pretty cool.
But it's basically the spoiler, I guess, is the amount of knowledge that the Imam will bring. And there's hadith about how many extra portions of knowledge he'll bring versus what's come so far. So when you then appreciate that, it's like, well, it actually gives a figure, a fraction. But anyway, we'll come to that. So that's exactly as you were saying. the community wasn't ready then. The community for the Prophet's message. The community isn't ready now for Imam's message because we haven't progressed enough and we're limited by how fast we can progress. So it does take some time. So we need to be highly developed at understanding knowledge and culture so that we can truly benefit. Once the Imam comes and he shares all these amazing different insights, that we're not just so far behind, basically. And just to see that evidenced, I guess, a little bit, and I find this beautiful. There's a discussion between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Kumail. And Amir al-Mu'mineen would say, "Oh Kumail, there is much knowledge here." And the Imam would say this as he points to his chest. He's pointing to him and says, "There's so much knowledge here. If only I come by those who can carry it." Right? You know, like some of these nights when Amir al-Mu'mineen, you're like, you're just too good, man.
Yeah.
I'm very glad we've got you as a leader than others, right? So he continues, "If I wished, I would have created for you light and fire out of water." Long before, obviously, we understood what comes later. But you imagine you say that to someone back then. If I wish, I would have created for you light and fire out of water. Light and fire out of water. You're looking at water, like that extinguishes fire.
Exactly.
And the relationship between light and water is also interesting with refraction, whatever. But like, how on earth is this guy claiming from water he's going to be able to create light and fire? And now we think electricity, hydropower. So the community then wasn't ready for this intellectual knowledge. That the Imam's like, "Please, can someone wake up? I can give this to someone." Like,
but you know, like he also said, "If only I can come by those who carry it."
yeah.
There was another hadith that he was talking about. He was telling one of his companions. His companion asked him something about the pious and
And
he was like, "Okay. Trust me, like,
are you sure you're ready for this?"
Sure? Yeah, and then he died after that.
Yeah.
So
the intro to that whole sermon is like, "You sure you're ready? You sure you're ready?" Like, that's powerful.
And as soon as he received that knowledge, he passed away on the spot.
Crazy,
so if only I can come by those who can carry it, like,
it's weighty.
It's a huge responsibility.
So weighty.
Yeah.
And this isn't just the Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is also the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran 27:88, "You see the mountains which you assume to be stationary whilst they drift like passing clouds." You know, people looking at the mountains back then, even now, they're like, yeah, they're not moving. Then you learn about tectonic plates. I think that's kind of the thing that, you know, moves them around or whatever. It's incredible. And another one, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَيْنَنَاهَا بِأَيْدِيهِ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. We've built the heaven with might, and indeed it is we who are its expanders. And this very new telescope that's just gone up, it's gone to, they're saying like, it's gone to the brink of the galaxy to go find the next galaxy. It's just like all this kind of stuff. So, you know, whilst back in the day, they probably wouldn't have thought there's something beyond those blue skies. They then discover space, they then discover different parts of space, and then it's continuing. So it's constantly ongoing. So coming back a bit then, so it could be said that the state of the Imam was delayed until the end of time because mankind needs time to reach the level of sophistication whereby it can absorb and appreciate the knowledge and the change that's going to come with it, right? Mankind's yet to reach this level, and if the promised day were to come too early, there is a chance that the community would reject it and just falsify and be like, oh, water out of fire, whatever, you're crazy, this isn't going to work.
Which would you say has been done for the last few Imams? Well, all the 11, they weren't ready, so their thing was rejected.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know, it's a really interesting point.
Yeah,
maybe that holds.
Yeah.
Very interesting point, actually. I guess some people were ready for it and others, the majority weren't, right? Otherwise it would have spread further. But what you can see is, within the Imam alayhim salam, people being attracted to their approach, to their nature. Even like some of the most evil of people turning around, they become attracted to the knowledge and the wisdom that they bring with them.
Yeah.
So I guess that's evidence to show that they do bring something very special that can change people's hearts and minds. And inshallah, once Imam comes, it's going to be, you know, completely different level. And again, we'll come on to that next week, inshallah. So the limitations and needs of mankind are the cause for the delay. So we know there's a delay. We know there's the conditions that need to be met. We know we're praying for them. The question is, what is our role, right? What should we be doing? And this is a quick plug to Active Intidar, who haven't asked for this plug, but run by people who we know, very close to us, and may Allah grant them more rizq in their endeavors. Inshallah. Active Intidar on Instagram. I think you can find them mainly short clips and kind of things on how you at home, as families, as friends, can do more to be more forward and first step forward kind of mindset with your awaiting or preparation, we should say, for welcoming the Imam and to make sure you're ready for it. So, what does it mean to wait? And the Holy Prophet is reported to say, the best deed for my nation is to await relief from God. What does it mean to wait? And this is inshallah what we will end on today. The first type of waiting is maybe one that we're all guilty of, or I'm guilty of, dormant waiting. So you forget any kind of change. You just let the world continue to go through with all its crazy oppression and injustice. And you just say, you know what I'm just going to wait and watch. And eventually this big day is going to come and the ultimate revolution will kick off. And, you know, I'll just watch it from my couch or hopefully get called up to the team, right? You're just kind of like, but otherwise I'm not going to train. And we know that this day will come because our narrations tell us when the earth is full of oppression, this is going to be when it's the case. And there are narrations to go into that, but we won't go into them for now. So there's dormant waiting. What we're more interested in and what we believe to be when the Prophet talks about the best deed for my nation is to await relief from God is proactive waiting. And we've got 3 different types of proactive waiting. There is a theological purpose, an administrative purpose, and an ethical purpose. So, going into these, the proactive waiting, theological purpose behind it. Put very simply, and you can see some of the notes there on screen, this is largely to do with you having the yaqeen, the belief, the conviction that there is this concept, this ghaib, this unseen. You in your head have deduced logically and spiritually that this is a haqq, this is a truth, this is a certainty. The Imam is who we think he is. We've looked at all the evidence and we've spent time investing, for example, in this book and in our lectures and whatever, to realize that this isn't just a mere myth or a fantasy. No, we now actually truly believe in it that there's going to be this grand mission. And Imam Sallallahu was reported to say, by Allah, your Imam will disappear for years during your age so that you will be tested. And you'll be thrashed just as the waves of the sea thrash against the sailing ships. None will be saved except those who God has taken an oath from, and they have fulfilled that oath. That's a big thing for us, again, to have Imam Sallallahu saying, it's going to be tough. You're going to be thrashed. It's just going to be like just as the waves of the sea thrash against sailing ships. We're going to be gliding through life and we're going to get hit with these challenges. We're going to get hit with these doubts. Is he actually real? I believe in my whole life. Is he actually real? We're going to be hit and tested. And it's about us in our proactive waiting to maintain our theological purpose to say, we're firm, we're clear, we'll ride the waves, we're good. So that's the first angle. The second is an administrative purpose. And in order to fulfill the administrative purpose, the theological purpose needs to be there in the first place. The theological purpose is the groundwork. Thereafter, we can be administrative. We can prepare, we can set the groundwork for the reappearance. We can't be hasty or put a specific time frame on it. And interestingly, this I found this very interesting. There are narrations that condemn those who are known as the waqatun or waqatun. I'm not sure it's written in English. So those who put a specific date on the appearance. And I was actually sent a message the other day by someone who said, could you have a look at this clip? It's very weird. This scholar or person is talking about the Imam and he said this is the date where it's going to happen.
Oh.
And she was saying, I feel very uncomfortable with this. Do you have any books that I can read to get better clued up? And I was thinking, actually, yeah, you know what, we're going to cover this today. Like, there are hadith that Sayyidina informs us of that condemn those who put a specific date. And the hadith is a bit like this: the waqatun lies. We are a household that does not give a specific time for this matter. God is determined to disprove the times given by the waqatun.
He's determined.
Yeah. So I think that's a pretty strong evidence to illustrate it. And why? Because if the oppressors would know that when the actual time is, they would work actively to try and undermine it.
Which makes sense.
And therefore we should deny the oppressors the opportunity to undermine and work against the oppressors, against the reappearance. So that's the administrative purpose. And finally, the ethical purpose.
So before you go into that, what sorts of examples would you sort of think about when it comes to setting the groundwork for the appearance?
You would know better than me with some of the work that you do.
Oh, no.
Come on.
Would you just, a couple of examples, like maybe volunteering and setting aside some time as a family or as a group to set about a strategy or something as to what you would personally be able to help the imam with.
Yeah, and contribute.
Yeah, maybe something that you're strong in, but also as a group, what your sort of strengths could lie in.
100%.
I know some people have talked about hedge funds to
make sure he's got the funding to do it.
Yeah, legit,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
And there's other groups that have talked about, creating an education system that is, or a system or a network that can prepare people for the reappearance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's so many things that can be possible. There's another group, there's obviously other groups such as, who was just saying, for example, that prepare people for the reappearance, because the Imam will announce himself in 5 ways, 3 of which are associating with Imam Hussein. And so when people say, who is Hussein? That's when
you have the ban already.
Yeah, and they then associate Hussein with goodness, which then, if the Imam is associated with Hussein, then they associate the Imam with goodness.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's there's a few ways, but
I think with all of those, and as you said, there's so many. I think the one that always sticks out for me is making sure the family home is strong enough, understands it, believes in it. Again, if we know that we're going to be like ships thrashed by the waves, we need to make sure our foundations ourselves, and Islam is a very family, like in the Islamic kind of infrastructure for community, families play a very significant part. It's like you have your family first, then you have your community, then you have your nation, then like you kind of work from the family.
Yeah.
So if you have multiple strong hubs, and those hubs are families who have absolute conviction in this and they're trained, and you invest in your household first and you have this balance, then you can go and do more. And I remember in Shaykh Al-Fan, whose tafsir we were obviously looking at last time, Ziyamat Ashura, in his tafsir on the Dua Shahr Ramadan, Allahumma adkhil ala ahli al-qubur as-surur, in the line, Allahumma aslih kulla fasid min umur al-muslimin, oh Allah, even the affairs of the Muslims, or resolve the affairs of the Muslims. Before he goes on the whole discussion on how to do that, he's like, you need to find an equilibrium in yourself. He said, we've had too many people that basically step up and think, I'm going to be the reformer, when they've not reformed themselves. Which again makes you like go back into your whole thing, how am I going to reform?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think all of those things that you mentioned, plus the home, massively essential. I'm slightly wary of time, so I'm going to make sure we quickly finish off these last bits. So we had the administrative purpose, and now we have the ethical purpose. And this is allowing for the earth to be adequately prepared through the process of enjoining good and forbidding evil. And the very famous line, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. There has to be a nation among you summoning to the good, bidding what is right, forbidding what is wrong. And this is applicable at all times, all eras, all generations. And the Prophet condemned the people at the end of time because they became deviant and did not enjoin good and forbid evil, and rather did exactly what we're seeing and what we're concerned about, and we talk about a lot together actually. People at that time would enjoin evil and forbid good. And there's so many examples of that happening all over the place, right? I remember back in the day, the example that used to be given was Las Vegas being built, and this this desert land being built into basically a heaven or hell for gambling. So you have people actively enjoining you towards evil rather than forbidding good, rather than forbidding evil. Different other movements nowadays that obviously we don't need to go into, but there's so many different angles of this. So what is our role? So if waiting meant that we shouldn't enjoin good and forbid evil, then the Prophet would not have condemned the people at the end of time for not following this obligation. So we see it's critical. We have narrations indicating that the people at the end of time of the occultation who enjoin good and forbid evil are given an even higher status than the people of any other time. And we saw that one about even those who fought alongside the Holy Prophet. If you have that belief in the Imam and in the occultation, you're on that kind of rank as if you fought alongside the Holy Prophet. And we're all able to do this, and it's not just the role of the scholars. I think that's the thing we need to hammer home, and what you were alluding to as well. There is finding your personal professional traits or your skill set and ensuring it is in service of preparing the grounds for the Imam. Surah 9 verse 105, go on working, God will see your conduct, and his apostle and the faithful as well. Allah will see what you're trying to do, right? That you're really struggling using that extra bit of time that you have with your expertise to portray and deliver and create this environment that when the Imam comes, he's not alone when he comes to your land. He's got supporters that he can trust and institutions that he can leverage, for example. Our role, therefore, is to call unto faith with sincerity, and Imam Sajjad alayhi reported to say, awaiting relief is itself a great relief. Everyone who works sincerely and for the pleasure of Allah, he's said to be waiting for his Imam and setting the groundwork for his appearance. And that was the very goal of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, where he comes out in his journey towards Karbala on when he's leaving. I've not set out due to discontent nor out of arrogance. I did not rise as a corrupter nor as an oppressor. Rather, I wish to call for reform in the nation of my grandfather. I wish to call for what is good and to forbid what is evil. And that is our very motto. That is exactly what we're here to try and do. But before we can call others, we need to make sure we are adhering to the call.
Inshallah.
Ourselves. Inshallah, inshallah, inshallah. With that, I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
But next week, we go on to two very interesting topics. We'll spend a little bit of time on the role of women specifically in the awaited Saviour's revolution. And then we go on to the cosmic civilization. Very, very fancy title. Super interesting. The civilization as a goal, Imam al-Mahdi and the global civilization, Imam al-Mahdi within science and worship as well, and the amount of knowledge and technological advancement that inshallah he will bring through the divine wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. And inshallah we will see you then. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.